The moment my father called me an idiot in front of everyone at his 60th birthday dinner, something inside me finally broke. I had spent $78,000 on a custom Ford F-350 for him, hoping to finally earn his approval after decades of emotional neglect. Instead, he raised his crystal glass, smiled at our extended family and friends, and mockingly toasted to my idiot son, trying to buy love with money. The room erupted in laughter. 20 years of trying to please him ended in that moment. The relationship between my father and me was always complicated. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, I watched him build his construction company from nothing. Tom Wagner was the epitome of the American dream. Rising from apprentice carpenter to owning Wagner Construction, one of the largest commercial builders in our county. He had calloused hands, a weathered face, and a reputation for being the hardest working man in any room. I was born when he was just getting the business off the ground. My earliest memories involve sitting on stacks of lumber, watching him command job sites with a natural authority that intimidated even men twice my age. "That's how a real man works, Igor," he would tell me, pointing to himself and his crew hauling materials or operating heavy machinery. My mother, Sarah, was the buffer between us, translating his gruff communication into something a sensitive boy could understand. "Your daddy shows love through providing, not through words," she would explain after he missed another school play or baseball game. I believed her because I needed to. When Mom died of cancer when I was 12, that buffer disappeared. The funeral was the only time I ever saw my father cry, and even then, it was just for a moment before he straightened his tie and told me to be strong for your mother. The next day, he was back at work, and I was left wondering how to navigate my teenage years without her gentle guidance. High school was when the real disappointment set in. While my father wanted me to learn the construction trade, I found myself drawn to numbers and analysis. I joined the investment club and started reading the Wall Street Journal instead of helping at job sites on weekends. Each academic achievement was met with the same response. Book smarts don't build character, like hard work does. Despite his disapproval, I pursued finance in college, eventually earning an MBA from Wharton. The distance between us grew with each degree and promotion. I built a successful investment firm specializing in sustainable commercial real estate development, ironically financing projects similar to the ones my father built. The irony was lost on him. "You just push papers around," he would say at family gatherings. "Never built anything with your hands." My wife Jessica was the first to point out the pattern. "You know you'll never get the approval you're looking for," she said one night after a particularly tense Thanksgiving dinner. "He's incapable of giving it." I knew she was right, but some childish part of me still craved his validation. When my father had a minor heart scare last year, something shifted in me. The doctor called it a warning sign, not a heart attack, but it forced me to confront his mortality. Suddenly, the clock was ticking on our reconciliation. His 60th birthday seemed like the perfect opportunity to make a grand gesture, to finally break through the walls between us. I spent months researching the perfect gift. My father had driven the same Ford pickup for 15 years, refusing to replace it despite its rusting frame and failing transmission. "Still runs fine," he would insist, even as it left him stranded twice last winter. In his world, replacing something that still worked was wasteful, regardless of reliability. The Ford F-350 Limited was everything his old truck wasn't. Powerful, reliable, loaded with technology, yet still undeniably tough. I ordered it with every option he had ever mentioned wanting: the diesel engine, towing package, leather interior, heated seats for his increasingly arthritic back, and the premium sound system he would never admit to wanting, but always admired in my vehicles. Jessica watched me obsess over the details, with a mixture of support and concern. "Just remember that a gift, even an expensive one, can't fix everything between you two," she cautioned, as I finalized the $78,000 purchase. The truck was delivered 3 days before his birthday. It was magnificent, gleaming black with custom wheels, and his company logo subtly incorporated into the design. I arranged to unveil it at his house, before we all left for the birthday dinner. When I pulled up to his modest ranch house with the truck in tow, I felt a nervous excitement I hadn't experienced since childhood. This was it. This would be the moment he finally saw me as successful, thoughtful, worthy of his respect. I brought him outside with a flimsy excuse about needing help with something in the driveway. His reaction when he saw the truck wasn't what I had imagined during those months of planning. There was no wide smile, no emotional embrace, not even appreciation. He circled it once, hands in pockets, nodding slightly. "Well," he finally said, "at least you didn't waste your money on something foreign." Then he turned and walked back inside to finish getting ready for dinner. Jessica squeezed my arm. "He's processing," she whispered. "Give him time." I wanted to believe her, but the familiar weight of disappointment was already settling in my chest. Still, I held on to hope that perhaps, surrounded by friends and family at dinner, he might let his guard down enough to show genuine gratitude. I handed him the keys and title paperwork before we left, which he tucked into his jacket pocket without comment. I didn't realize then that this wasn't just another disappointment. It was the setup for one of the most humiliating moments of my life. The reservation at Sullivan's Steakhouse was for 7 o'clock. I had arranged everything: a private room for the 30-plus guests, an open bar, a custom menu featuring my father's favorites, and a towering chocolate cake decorated with miniature construction tools made of fondant. The bill would likely exceed $5,000, but I didn't care. This night was supposed to be special. Jessica and I arrived early to make sure everything was perfect. She looked stunning in a navy blue dress, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. "Try to enjoy tonight, regardless of how he reacts," she advised, straightening my tie. "You've done something incredibly generous. That's what matters." Guests began arriving at 6:30. My father's friends were mostly fellow contractors and business associates, men with firm handshakes who called me Tom's boy despite the fact that I was 35 years old. My half-sister Amy arrived with her husband and kids. 10 years younger than me, the product of my father's brief second marriage, Amy had always been his favorite. She had followed his footsteps into the construction business, working as a project manager at his company, and he never missed an opportunity to praise her accomplishments. My father arrived at 6:50, driving the new truck. I watched through the window as he parked it prominently near the front of the restaurant, taking his time to lock it and look back admiringly before entering. When he walked in with his girlfriend Morgan, a real estate agent 15 years his junior, I noticed a new spring in his step. He was immediately surrounded by his friends, who clapped him on the back and wished him happy birthday. "Tom, that truck outside yours?" asked Bill Harper, his oldest friend and former foreman. My father nodded, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "Sure is. Just got it today." "Must have set you back a pretty penny," Bill said, whistling low. "Worth every cent," my father replied, not acknowledging that he hadn't spent a dime on it. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe this was his way of accepting the gift, by embracing it as his own. I approached them, extending my hand to Bill. "Good to see you again, sir." Bill shook my hand warmly. "Igor, your dad here was just showing us pictures of that beauty of a truck last week. Said he was treating himself for the big 6-0. Looks even better in person." I blinked in confusion. How could he have been showing pictures of a truck he hadn't seen until today? Before I could respond, my father clapped Bill on the shoulder and steered him toward the bar. "Let me get you a drink, old man." Jessica appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "Everything okay?" "You look puzzled." "I'm fine," I said, though a small knot was forming in my stomach. "Just thought I heard something strange." The dinner progressed smoothly at first. The steaks were perfectly cooked, the wine flowed freely, and the conversation around the large U-shaped table was lively. I sat near one end with Jessica, while my father held court at the center, Morgan at his side. Amy was seated to his right, occasionally leaning in to whisper something that made him laugh. After the main course was cleared, it was time for speeches. Amy went first, standing with her wine glass in hand. She spoke eloquently about our father's dedication to his craft, his commitment to family, and his generosity of spirit. "Dad, you've always been my rock, my inspiration, and my biggest supporter," she concluded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I wouldn't be who I am today without your guidance and love." Our father beamed at her, raising his glass in acknowledgement. The room applauded warmly. Then it was my turn. I had prepared remarks, practiced them even, but standing there under the warm lights with all eyes on me, I abandoned my script. Instead, I spoke from the heart. "Dad," I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. "We haven't always seen eye to eye on everything. We've chosen different paths, different ways of measuring success. But what I've always admired about you is your determination, your unwavering commitment to building something lasting." I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. "When Mom died, you showed me that the way forward is to keep building, keep moving, even when it feels impossible. I've tried to carry that lesson with me in everything I do." I could see his expression shifting, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Was it emotion or discomfort? I couldn't tell, but I pressed on. "The truck is a small token of my appreciation for everything you've taught me, and everything you continue to teach me. Happy 60th birthday, Dad. I hope we have many more years ahead to bridge the distances between us." The applause was polite but lacked the emotional warmth that had followed Amy's speech. I sat down feeling slightly deflated, but relieved to have spoken honestly. Jessica squeezed my knee under the table. "That was beautiful," she whispered. Then my father stood. The room quieted immediately. He cut an imposing figure even at 60, broad-shouldered and straight-backed, with a full head of silver hair and penetrating blue eyes that could make employees tremble. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, his deep voice filling the room. "Reaching 60 years feels like a milestone worth celebrating, especially when I'm surrounded by the people who matter most." He nodded to friends around the table, smiled at Amy, then took a sip of his whiskey. "I've been blessed with success in business," he continued, "but a man's true wealth is measured by his family and friendships." There were murmurs of agreement around the table. "Amy, you make me proud every single day, with your work ethic and your heart. You're building on the legacy I started, making it better, stronger." Amy beamed at him, and I felt a familiar pang of jealousy that I quickly tried to suppress. This wasn't a competition, I reminded myself. Or at least it shouldn't be. My father swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his expression shifting as his gaze turned to me. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something in his stance made me straighten in my chair. "And Igor," he said, raising his glass higher. "My firstborn." The room fell silent in anticipation. I felt Jessica's hand tighten around mine under the table. Always trying to prove something. Always thinking the answer to every problem is throwing money at it. His tone was light, almost playful, but there was an edge to it that made my skin prickle. "So let me propose a toast. To my idiot son, trying to buy love with money." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I'd just heard. Then came the laughter, rippling around the table. Some guests chuckled awkwardly, others more heartily. A few looked uncomfortable, eyes darting between my father and me. Jessica's nails dug into my palm. "Let's go," she whispered fiercely, but I barely heard her. In that moment, watching my father's smug smile as he entertained his friends at my expense, something crystallized in me. This wasn't new behavior. This was who he had always been, who he would always be. No gift, no achievement, no gesture would ever be enough to win the approval I had spent my life chasing. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I looked directly at my father, and saw not the towering figure of my childhood, but a small, insecure man who could only build himself up by tearing others down. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The laughter began to fade as people noticed me standing. My father's smile faltered slightly. I simply smiled back, nodded once to the room, and walked out without a word. Jessica followed close behind, her hand at the small of my back. As we reached the restaurant entrance, I felt a light touch on my arm. It was Morgan, my father's girlfriend, who had apparently slipped away from the table. "Igor, wait," she said softly, glancing back to ensure she wasn't overheard. "I just wanted you to know. Your father has actually been showing off pictures of that truck to everyone for weeks. He found the brochure in your office when he visited last month. He knew exactly what you were getting him." I stared at her, processing this new information. "So he planned this? The whole humiliation was premeditated?" Morgan looked uncomfortable. I don't know what was in his mind. I just thought you should know that he was genuinely excited about the truck. Whatever happened in there, she trailed off, not finishing the thought. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. As Jessica and I stepped into the cool evening air, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for decades. The decision I was about to make would change everything, but for the first time in my relationship with my father, I felt completely clear about what needed to be done. The drive home was quiet. Jessica knew me well enough to give me space when I needed to process. She simply drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee, a silent reminder of her presence and support. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket. Amy, most likely, or perhaps some of the more sympathetic dinner guests checking on me. I ignored it. Whatever they had to say could wait until I had sorted through the hurricane of emotions swirling inside me. When we finally reached our home in the suburbs, a 4-bedroom colonial we had bought with the hope of filling it with children someday, Jessica made tea while I changed out of my suit. The formal clothing felt like a costume now, a symbol of the pretense I had been maintaining for years. I sat at our kitchen island, staring into the steaming mug Jessica had placed before me. He's been doing this my entire life, I said finally, breaking the silence. Making me feel small, making me feel like I'll never measure up. Jessica nodded, leaning against the counter across from me. I know. No, I don't think you do, I said, not unkindly. Because I don't think I fully understood it until tonight. It's not that I don't measure up to his standards. It's that he moves the goalposts every time I get close. He needs me to fail. My success threatens him somehow. That sounds about right, Jessica agreed. I've been watching this dynamic play out since we started dating 8 years ago. Remember our engagement party? When he gave that toast about being surprised you managed to convince such a beautiful woman to settle for you? I winced at the memory. Or my business launch when he told everyone my company would fold within a year because I didn't have the stomach for risk? Or last Christmas, Jessica added, when he spent 20 minutes explaining to my parents how your college choice was wasting good manual labor skills right after you gave him that expensive watch. We fell silent again, the pattern suddenly so clear it was almost laughable. Almost. What are you thinking about doing? Jessica asked after a while, her voice gentle but direct. I took a deep breath. The truck is still in my name. I never officially transferred the title. He has the paperwork, but it hasn't been filed. Jessica raised an eyebrow. You're going to take it back? Yes, I said firmly. Not out of spite, not to hurt him, but because continuing to give to someone who can only take is not healthy for either of us. It's enabling a relationship that needs to change, or end. Jessica came around the island and wrapped her arms around me from behind. I'm proud of you, she whispered against my hair. This isn't about the money. This is about your self-respect. My phone buzzed again. This time, I glanced at it. Amy. A text message asking if I was okay, saying Dad didn't mean it the way it came out, that I knew how he could be sometimes. The familiar excuses, the rationalization of emotional abuse as just his way, just his sense of humor, just something I should accept because he was family. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, setting the phone down without responding. I'm done trying to earn love that should be freely given. Later that night, after Jessica had gone to bed, I sat in my home office going through some old boxes. I found a collection of letters I had never seen before, tucked into a folder of my mother's personal papers that my father had given me years ago, claiming he had no use for her sentimental stuff. The letters were from my mother to me, written during the last months of her life, intended to be given to me when I was older. My father had kept them from me, another small cruelty, in a lifetime of them. I read through them with tears streaming down my face. In one, dated just weeks before her death, she wrote, I worry about you and your father after I'm gone. He loves you fiercely, Igor, but he doesn't know how to show it except through criticism he thinks will make you stronger. It's how his father raised him, and he knows no other way. Don't let his harshness dim your gentle spirit. That sensitivity he tries to toughen out of you is your greatest strength, not a weakness. Another letter was even more direct. If your father ever becomes too difficult, too cruel, in his attempts to make you a man. Please remember that standing up for yourself is not disrespect. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. You are worthy of kindness, my sweet boy, especially from those who claim to love you. My mother had seen it all clearly. Even then, she had tried to protect me from beyond the grave, but her messages had been intercepted, her warnings silenced by the very man she was warning me about. I folded the letters carefully and placed them in my desk drawer. Then I made a phone call to a towing company I had used for corporate events. They specialized in luxury and exotic vehicle transport and could be discreet. I arranged for them to pick up the truck from my father's driveway at 5 in the morning, using the spare key I had kept. By the time I finally went to bed, sliding in next to Jessica's sleeping form, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. I was mourning the father I had always wanted but never had, while freeing myself from the exhausting pursuit of his approval. My phone buzzed once more before I drifted off to sleep. Another text from Amy. Dad's pretty upset. Says you're overreacting. Call him tomorrow? I turned the phone off without replying and fell into the deepest sleep I had experienced in years. I woke before dawn, the gray light of early morning barely filtering through our bedroom curtains. Jessica stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open as I slipped out of bed. It's happening, she murmured, voice thick with sleep. Yes, I said, pulling on jeans and a sweater. The towing company will be at his house in 30 minutes. She pushed herself up on one elbow. Want me to come with you? I shook my head. I'm not going. They'll bring it to the dealership directly. I don't need to be there. Probably for the best, she agreed, then hesitated. Are you sure about this, Igor? There's no going back once it's done. I sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. I'm sure. Maybe this forces a real conversation, or maybe it ends things completely. Either way, it's healthier than continuing as we have been. The towing company texted me at 5:15 to confirm they had the vehicle and were transporting it to the dealership as arranged. I thanked them and asked for confirmation when the delivery was complete. Then I made coffee and settled at the kitchen table with my laptop, trying to focus on work while waiting for the inevitable storm. It began at 6:48. My phone, which I had turned back on, exploded with notifications. First, a text from my father. Where the hell is the truck? Then another. Call me now. Then a voicemail, his voice tight with controlled rage. Whatever game you're playing, it stops now. Bring the truck back, or I'm reporting it stolen. I didn't respond. More messages followed from Amy, from my father's girlfriend Morgan, even from Bill and a couple other dinner guests who had somehow been pulled into the drama. By 8 o'clock I had 27 missed calls and 49 text messages. Jessica came downstairs dressed for her job as a pediatric occupational therapist, eyeing my phone as it buzzed again on the table. World War III? Something like that, I said, showing her the screen. The count had increased to 32 missed calls. Are you going to talk to him? Not yet, I said. He needs to understand I'm serious. By 9:30, the dealership confirmed they had received the truck and would process the return. I would take a hit on the value, of course. But I had expected that. Money was not the point. At 10:15, the doorbell rang. Jessica had already left for work, so I was alone when I opened the door to find Amy standing on my porch, arms crossed, expression stormy. What the hell, Igor? She demanded, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. Dad's going ballistic. He called the police to report the truck stolen. It wasn't stolen, I replied calmly, closing the door. It's registered in my name. I never transferred the title. I have every legal right to take it back. This isn't about legal rights. Amy's voice rose as she paced my living room. This is about family. You embarrassed him in front of everyone by walking out of his birthday dinner, and now you've humiliated him by taking back a gift. I leaned against the wall, watching her. Amy and I had never been close, the age gap and her favored status creating a distance neither of us had tried hard to bridge. She had my father's coloring, the same penetrating blue eyes, but her features were softer, more like her mother Diane, Dad's second wife who had moved to Florida after their divorce. Did he tell you what happened at dinner? I asked quietly. Amy stopped pacing. He said you overreacted to a joke. That he was just giving you a hard time like always, and you got overly sensitive. He called me an idiot in front of 30 people, I said flatly. He mocked me for trying to buy love with money, after I spent $78,000 on a truck he had been bragging about for weeks. That's not a joke, Amy. That's cruelty. Something in my tone must have reached her because her defensive posture softened slightly. He doesn't mean it the way it comes out sometimes, she said, but with less conviction. Doesn't he? I moved to the living room, gesturing for her to sit. How many times has he belittled you in public? How many times has he dismissed your accomplishments or made you feel small? Amy sank onto the couch, her anger visibly deflating. That's different. He's not like that with me. Exactly, I said, taking the armchair across from her. He's like that with me. Only me. Always has been, and I'm done accepting it. A long silence stretched between us. When Amy finally spoke again, her voice was quieter, more reflective. He's not perfect, Igor, but he's been through a lot. Losing Mom nearly destroyed him. She was my mother, not yours, I pointed out gently. And losing her nearly destroyed me too. But I didn't use my pain as an excuse to hurt others. Amy looked down at her hands. There's something you should know, she said after a moment, about Dad. Something the family has been keeping quiet. My stomach tightened with apprehension. What is it? He was diagnosed with early-stage dementia 6 months ago, she said, meeting my eyes again. The doctor says it's progressing slowly, but it's affecting his judgment, his impulse control. That comment at dinner. It might not have been entirely him. The news hit me like a physical blow. Dementia. It explained some things. The increased irritability, the occasional confusion I had noticed but attributed to age. But it also complicated everything. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, a fresh wave of hurt washing over me. He made us promise not to, Amy admitted. He's in denial about it, refusing to fully comply with treatment. Says it's just senior moments and everyone's overreacting. I've been trying to get him to tell you, but he's stubborn. I ran my hands through my hair, processing this new information. This changes the context, but not the pattern, Amy. He's been treating me this way my entire life, long before any diagnosis. I know, she said softly, surprising me. I've seen it. I just never knew what to do about it. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults. Amy shared perspectives on our father I had never considered, stories from her childhood that paralleled some of my own experiences. The conversation wasn't easy, but it was necessary, a first step toward understanding each other beyond our relationships with our father. As she was leaving, Amy paused at the door. He does love you, you know, in his own broken way. Maybe, I conceded. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. After Amy left, I had a lot to think about. The dementia diagnosis changed things, making a simple break more complicated morally. But it didn't erase decades of emotional abuse, nor did it obligate me to continue accepting harmful behavior. My phone continued to buzz throughout the day. The count of missed calls had reached 88 by evening, a mixture of my father, family members, and family friends drawn into the conflict. I silenced it, needing space to think. That evening, Jessica returned home with takeout and a sympathetic ear. I told her about Amy's visit and the revelation about my father's condition. Does this change your mind about anything? She asked gently. I considered the question carefully. It changes how I approach this, but not the fundamental need for boundaries. If anything, his condition means he needs more structure, more clear consequences for harmful behavior, not less. Jessica nodded, squeezing my hand across the dinner table. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Later that night, as we were preparing for bed, Jessica paused in the bathroom doorway, toothbrush in hand. There's something I've been waiting for the right time to tell you, she said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in her voice. I looked up from the book I was pretending to read. What is it? A smile bloomed across her face. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. I confirmed it yesterday. For a moment, all the stress and drama with my father vanished. After 3 years of trying, of disappointed hopes and negative tests, this was the news we had been waiting for. I crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering Jessica in my arms, careful not to squeeze too tight. "We're having a baby," I whispered. Joy and terror and love all mingled together in my chest. "We are," she confirmed, tears shining in her eyes. "I was going to tell you after the birthday dinner, but then everything happened." I kissed her, my own eyes damp. "This is perfect timing, absolutely perfect." As we held each other, I realized that family was not just what you were born into, but what you chose to create. And I was determined that the family Jessica and I built would be founded on respect and unconditional love, breaking the cycle my father had perpetuated. The next day brought another complication. My business partner, Marcus, called with disturbing news. "Your father's been calling around to our clients," he said without preamble, "telling them you're unstable, that they should reconsider their investments with us." 3 people have called me asking what's going on. The news was shocking, but not entirely surprising. "I'll handle it," I assured him, anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. This was crossing a line, threatening not just me but our employees and clients. Before I could decide how to address this new escalation, I received a text from my cousin Jake, my father's nephew whom I rarely saw but had always liked. Heard about what happened. Not surprised. He did the same thing to my dad 20 years ago. "Call me if you want to talk." I called Jake immediately, and our conversation was illuminating. My father had apparently been engaged in similar patterns of public humiliation and emotional manipulation with his brother, Jake's father, for years. The rift had eventually become permanent, which explained why I had seen so little of that side of the family growing up. My dad always regretted not standing up to him sooner, Jake told me. By the time he finally did, the damage was too deep to repair. Don't wait like he did. That afternoon, I received an email from my father's attorney, threatening legal action over the truck. It was a baseless threat, as the vehicle was legally mine, but it showed how far my father was willing to go to maintain control. I forwarded it to my own lawyer and asked her to respond appropriately. The situation was spiraling, becoming more complex and bitter than I had anticipated. But even as external pressures mounted, I felt an internal clarity I had never experienced before. The path forward wasn't simple, but for the first time, I was choosing it for myself rather than seeking someone else's approval. That evening, I received yet another unexpected visitor. Morgan, my father's girlfriend, asked to meet me at a coffee shop near my office. Curious about what she might have to say, I agreed. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she said as we sat with our coffees in a quiet corner, "and I'd prefer to keep it that way." "Okay," I said cautiously. Morgan looked nervous, turning her cup in her hands. "There's something else you should know, beyond the dementia diagnosis. Something that might help explain his recent behavior, though not excuse it." I waited, bracing myself for more family secrets. "Your father's company is in financial trouble," she said in a low voice. "Serious trouble. He's been hiding it from everyone, even Amy. The construction market downturn hit him hard, and he's made some bad decisions in the last year." This was genuinely surprising news. Wagner Construction had always been successful, a local institution with a sterling reputation. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that he's been using personal funds to make payroll," Morgan said. "He's nearly depleted his savings. That's part of why." She hesitated. "Part of why he was so angry about the truck being taken back," I finished for her. "He was counting on selling it." Morgan nodded. "I think so, yes. Though he would never admit it." As I drove home from the meeting with Morgan, pieces were falling into place. My father's increased bitterness, his lashing out, his extreme reaction to the truck being reclaimed. Pride had prevented him from admitting his financial difficulties, just as it prevented him from acknowledging his health issues. The situation was more complicated than a simple case of emotional abuse. My father was a proud man facing the collapse of everything he had built, his health and his business declining simultaneously. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it contextualizes it in ways I hadn't considered. I arrived home to find Jessica waiting with yet another revelation, her expression grave as she held her phone out to me. On the screen was a news article from the local business journal. "Wagner Construction faces allegations of unpaid vendors, potential bankruptcy looming." The situation with my father had just become public, and everything was about to change. The days following the revelation about my father's business troubles were a blur of activity. Jessica urged me to reach out to him, to offer help despite everything that had happened. "This isn't just about your relationship anymore," she pointed out as we lay in bed that night, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "There are employees who depend on that company. Families." She was right, of course. Wagner Construction employed nearly 40 people, many of whom had been with the company for decades. Good people with mortgages, children in college, retirement plans built around the company's promised pension system. If the business failed, the ripple effects would impact far more lives than just my father's. The next morning, I called Dr. Lawrence, an old family friend who had been our physician since I was a child, and was now treating my father for his dementia. I was careful to frame the conversation around concern for my father's well-being rather than seeking confidential information. "I'm worried about him, Doc," I said after explaining the birthday dinner incident and its aftermath. "This behavior seems extreme, even for him." Dr. Lawrence sighed heavily. "I can't discuss specific details of your father's condition without his consent, Igor. You know that." "I understand. I'm not asking for his medical records. Amy told me about the diagnosis. I just need to know if what I'm seeing is the disease, or just him." There was a long pause. "Frontotemporal dementia can cause personality changes," the doctor said carefully. "Impulsivity, poor judgment, inappropriate social behavior. But these typically represent exaggerations of existing personality traits, rather than complete character changes." "So you're saying this is who he's always been, just with fewer filters now?" "I didn't say that," Dr. Lawrence replied, but his tone conveyed what he couldn't state directly. "What I can tell you is that your father has been resistant to accepting his diagnosis and inconsistent with his medication. The stress of business troubles certainly isn't helping his condition." I thanked him and hung up, feeling both more informed and more conflicted. My father was ill, yes, but the illness was magnifying long-standing character flaws rather than creating new ones. That afternoon, I had a session with my therapist, Dr. Winters, whom I had been seeing intermittently for years to work through my complicated relationship with my father. I explained everything that had happened, including the revelations about his health and business. "What do you feel is your responsibility here?" she asked after listening attentively. I considered the question carefully. "I don't know. Part of me feels I should help for the sake of the employees and the family legacy. Part of me thinks getting further involved would just enable more toxic behavior." "Those are both valid perspectives," she acknowledged. "But I want you to consider a third option. You can offer help with clear boundaries and conditions. Support doesn't have to mean surrender." Her words stayed with me as I left the session. Clear boundaries and conditions. Support without surrender. It was a nuanced approach that resonated with my values while protecting my newly established boundaries. When I arrived home, Jessica met me at the door with an urgent expression. Morgan called. "Your father's at the hospital." My heart lurched. What happened? Another heart issue? She wasn't specific, just said it wasn't life-threatening, but that you should come. "He's at Mercy General." I drove to the hospital with a maelstrom of emotions churning inside me. Concern, certainly, but also wariness. My father had used health issues to manipulate family dynamics before, though usually in more subtle ways. At the hospital, I found him sitting on the edge of a bed in the emergency department, looking uncharacteristically small in the thin hospital gown. A bandage wrapped around his right hand. Morgan sat in a chair nearby, relief evident in her expression when she saw me. "What happened?" I asked, addressing Morgan rather than my father. "He had an episode at the office," she explained quietly. "Lost his temper, punched a wall, broke 2 fingers and needed stitches in his knuckles." My father finally looked up at me, his expression a complex mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been shame. "Come to gloat?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual force. "No," I said simply. "I came because you're in the hospital and Morgan called me." A doctor entered before he could respond, bringing discharge papers and care instructions for his injured hand. I stepped out to give them privacy, using the moment to call Jessica and update her. When the paperwork was complete, I helped my father to Morgan's car. As Morgan went to retrieve it from the parking structure, we were left alone for the first time since the birthday dinner. "The business is in trouble," he said abruptly, staring straight ahead at the hospital entrance. "I know," I replied. "Of course you do." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Always knowing everything." I bit back a sharp retort, reminding myself of his condition and the circumstances. "Do you want help?" He turned to look at me then, suspicion evident in his gaze. "What kind of help?" "Financial and strategic. But there would be conditions." Before he could respond, Morgan pulled up with the car. The conversation was left hanging, unresolved like so many between us over the years. But a door had been opened, however slightly. The next day, I received a call from Bill Harper, my father's oldest friend and former foreman. "Your dad asked me to contact you," he said gruffly. "Says you offered to help with the business, but there are conditions. He wants to know what they are." I should have expected this. My father would rather communicate through an intermediary than speak to me directly about something this important. I'd prefer to discuss this with him personally. "Bill." "He's stubborn, you know that," Bill replied. "Just tell me and I'll pass it along. Save everyone some time." I sighed, recognizing the futility of fighting this approach. 3 conditions. First, he needs to follow his doctor's treatment plan for his dementia, consistently and completely. Second, he steps back from day-to-day operations, taking a chairman role while I work with the management team to restructure. Third, he agrees to weekly family therapy sessions with me for at least 6 months. There was a long whistle from the other end of the line. "That's asking a lot, Igor." "I'm offering a lot," I countered. "Financial investment and my time, which is valuable. These aren't punishments, Bill. They're necessary steps to salvage both the business and our relationship." "I'll pass it along," Bill said, his tone suggesting he didn't envy the task. "Don't hold your breath for a quick answer." 3 days passed with no word. I continued managing my own business while quietly researching Wagner Construction's situation. What I discovered was concerning. Beyond the surface financial issues, there were deeper problems. Outdated business practices, missed opportunities for technological integration, and a failure to adapt to changing market demands. On the 4th day, Morgan called. He wants to meet. Tomorrow at the family cabin. The cabin was neutral territory, a small hunting lodge on 50 acres about an hour outside the city. My grandfather had built it, and it had passed to my father upon his death. We had spent some rare, positive moments there during my childhood, fishing in the summer and hunting in the fall. It was a strategic choice for this conversation. "I'll be there," I agreed. "What time?" 11. He wants to talk alone. No lawyers, no mediators, just the 2 of you. I consulted with Jessica and my therapist before agreeing to the meeting. Both cautioned me to maintain clear boundaries while remaining open to genuine communication. "Remember, this isn't about winning or losing," Dr. Winters advised. "It's about finding a sustainable path forward." The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, its log exterior weathered by decades of harsh winters. My father's old truck was parked outside, the one he had driven before I gave him the new one. I pulled in beside it, taking a moment to center myself before getting out. He was sitting on the porch in one of the old Adirondack chairs, watching my approach with an unreadable expression. His bandaged hand rested on his knee. "You came," he said as I climbed the steps. Not a greeting, just an observation. I said I would. I took the chair beside him, looking out at the overgrown fields stretching down to the tree line. "The place needs maintenance." "Don't start," he growled. "I didn't ask you here for property management tips." I let the comment pass, waiting for him to get to the point. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. "Bill told me your conditions," he finally said. "Pretty controlling for someone who claims to be against manipulation. They're boundaries, not control tactics," I replied evenly. "And they're non-negotiable." He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly as the movement jarred his injured hand. "You have no idea what it takes to run a construction company. You push paper for a living." It was a familiar criticism, one he had wielded against me countless times. In the past, I would have defended myself, trying to prove my worth. This time, I simply shrugged, then declined my help. It's entirely your choice. My lack of engagement with the barb seemed to unsettle him. He hadn't come expecting indifference. The employees deserve better than what's happening, he said after another long silence. Good people. Loyal. I agree. That's why I'm offering to help, despite everything. He turned to look at me directly. You think I'm a terrible father. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I think you're a complicated man who never learned how to show love without conditions. I think you're facing challenges now that are beyond your capacity to handle alone. And I think you're scared. His face flushed with anger. I'm not scared of anything. Everyone's scared of something, Dad. I'm scared of becoming you. Of treating my child the way you treated me. His expression shifted at that. Something like surprise breaking through his defensive anger. Jessica's pregnant? I nodded. Due in March. He looked away, back toward the field and trees beyond. Your mother would have been happy about that. The mention of my mother, rare from him, caught me off guard. Yes, she would. I found her letters, he said unexpectedly. The ones to you. I shouldn't have kept them from you. That was wrong of me. The admission, as close to an apology as I had ever heard from him, hung in the air between us. I didn't acknowledge it directly, sensing that pushing for more would shut down this fragile moment of vulnerability. Why did you say what you did at the birthday dinner? I asked instead, the question that had been burning inside me for weeks. He rubbed his face with his uninjured hand, suddenly looking every day of his 60 years. I don't know. It just came out. The doctor says that happens now sometimes. But that's not. He trailed off, shaking his head. Not what? Not the whole truth, he admitted reluctantly. Part of me was angry. All those people congratulating me on the truck, assuming I bought it myself because that's what I let them believe. Then you standing up, making that speech about building bridges between us, like you were the bigger man. I felt small. I've never been good with feeling small. It was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I considered his words carefully before responding. I never intended to make you feel small. The truck was a genuine gesture, not a power play. I know that. Now, he shifted uncomfortably. Morgan helped me see that. She's been good for me. Better than I deserve, probably. We sat in silence again, but it felt different now, less hostile. A blue jay landed on the porch railing, regarding us curiously before flying off toward the trees. I'm in trouble, Igor, my father said finally, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. The business, my health. I'm losing control of everything, and I don't know how to stop it. In that moment, he wasn't the towering figure of my childhood or the antagonist of my adult years. He was just a man facing his mortality and the collapse of everything he had built, too proud to ask for help directly but desperate enough to accept it if offered with dignity. Let me help, I said simply. We'll figure it out together, but my conditions stand. Real treatment for your health issues. A step back from operations. And we work on our relationship, professionally guided. Those aren't punishments, Dad. They're the foundation we need to build something better. He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the land our family had owned for generations. Finally, he gave a single sharp nod. All right. As we drove back to the city in separate cars, I felt neither triumph nor resolution, but something more nuanced. A beginning, perhaps, of a different kind of relationship. Or at least, a chance at one. What I didn't know then was that my father's agreement was only the first step in a much more complicated journey. The depths of his financial troubles and the extent of his deception were greater than either of us had acknowledged, and the path to resolution would test the fragile truce we had just established. The preliminary audit of Wagner Construction revealed problems far worse than I had anticipated. My father had not only depleted his personal savings to cover payroll, but had taken out high-interest loans against company assets. Vendors were owed more than $300,000 in overdue payments, and there were tax issues that would require specialized accounting to unravel. But the most disturbing discovery came during a meeting with Diane, the company's longtime bookkeeper, who requested to speak with me privately after I had been working with the business for 2 weeks. There's something you need to know, she said, sliding a folder across the conference table. Your father has been selling off company equipment to cover personal debts. Equipment we're still using on job sites. I opened the folder to find bills of sale for 3 excavators, a bulldozer, and several specialized tools, all sold to a local equipment broker at well below market value. The dates corresponded with large cash withdrawals from my father's personal account. What kind of personal debts? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. Diane looked uncomfortable. I shouldn't be the one to tell you this. Please, Diane. I can't help fix things if I don't know what we're dealing with. She sighed, her loyalty to my father visibly warring with her concern for the company. Gambling debts, I think. He started going to the casino about 18 months ago, after his first health scare. Said it helped him relax. Then the trips became more frequent. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Gambling. A new addiction developing alongside his cognitive decline, creating a perfect storm of financial disaster. And he had been selling off company assets, equipment that belonged partly to the employee stock ownership program he had established years ago to cover his losses. Who knows about this? I asked. Just me, as far as I know. And now you. Diane looked miserable. I've been trying to cover for him, adjusting the books to account for the missing equipment as out for maintenance or transferred between job sites. I know it was wrong, but he's been good to me over the years. Paid for my daughter's college when my husband died. I assured Diane she wasn't in trouble and asked her to compile a complete list of everything that had been sold and to whom. Then I called my lawyer and my father's doctor, needing to understand both the legal implications and how his medical condition might be contributing to this behavior. Dr. Lawrence confirmed what I had suspected. Compulsive gambling can be a symptom of frontotemporal dementia, particularly in the early to middle stages. The disease impacts impulse control and risk assessment, making patients vulnerable to addictive behaviors they might never have engaged in previously. My lawyer's assessment of the legal situation was grim. If he's selling company assets to cover personal debts, especially assets that are partially owned through an employee stock program, that could constitute fraud, she explained. And if he's doing it while diagnosed with a condition that affects his judgment, there are competency issues to consider as well. I faced an impossible choice. Confront my father directly, potentially triggering another health crisis and public scandal that could doom the company, or work behind the scenes to address the issues without his knowledge, violating the transparency I had promised when taking on the restructuring. After careful consideration and consultation with Jessica and Dr. Winters, I decided on a modified approach. I would confront my father, but privately, away from the business, and with Dr. Lawrence present to help manage the medical aspects of the conversation. We arranged to meet at Dr. Lawrence's office after hours, under the guise of a consultation about my father's treatment plan. When my father arrived and saw me there, his expression darkened immediately. "What's this? An ambush?" he demanded. "Please sit down, Tom," Dr. Lawrence said calmly. "Igor has some concerns we need to discuss together." For the next hour, I methodically laid out what I had discovered about the gambling and the equipment sales. I presented bank statements, casino records obtained through my financial connections, and the bills of sale Diane had provided. Throughout, my father's face cycled through anger, denial, and finally, a defeated kind of acceptance. "Those equipment sales weren't legal," I said, keeping my voice even and non-accusatory. "The assets weren't yours alone to sell. They partially belonged to your employees through the stock program." "I was going to buy replacements," he muttered, staring at his hands. "Once I won back the money, I was due for a win." "That's the disease talking, Tom," Dr. Lawrence interjected gently. "The gambling addiction is a symptom of your condition. It's affecting your judgment, your impulse control. But we can treat it along with the other symptoms." My father's shoulders slumped, a posture so uncharacteristic for him that it was almost more alarming than the revelations themselves. "So what happens now? You turn me in? Destroy what's left of my reputation?" "No," I said firmly. "We fix this. But it requires changes beyond what we already agreed to." I outlined a new plan. My father would take a medical leave from the company effective immediately. I would assume temporary leadership as acting CEO. We would quietly repurchase the equipment that had been sold, using a loan secured against my personal assets. Most importantly, my father would enter an intensive treatment program for both his gambling addiction and his dementia. And if I refuse, he challenged, some of his old fire returning, then I'll have no choice but to disclose what I've found to the board and the employee shareholders, I replied. They have a right to know what's happened to their investment and their retirement funds. It wasn't a threat, but a statement of fact, and we both knew it. After a long, tense silence, he gave a curt nod. Fine. Your way, as usual. Not my way, I corrected him. The only way that gives us a chance to save the company and your legacy. As we left Dr. Lawrence's office, my father paused in the parking lot. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? That you can just step in and fix everything I've built and supposedly ruined? The old anger was there in his voice, the familiar pattern of turning vulnerability into attack. But for the first time, I could see it clearly for what it was. Fear disguised as aggression, shame masked by pride. I think we both have a lot to learn, I said quietly. You about accepting help, me about giving it without expectations. Neither of us has anything figured out, Dad. We're just doing the best we can with what we have. He didn't respond, just got into his car and drove away. But he showed up for his first treatment session the next day, and the day after that. It was a start. The weeks that followed were some of the most challenging of my career and our relationship. I worked 14-hour days, splitting time between my own business and salvaging Wagner construction. Jessica worried about the stress affecting the pregnancy, but supported my decision to see this through. Just remember that you're doing this for the right reasons, she reminded me one night as I pored over financial statements at our kitchen table. Not to win his approval, but because it's the right thing to do for all those families that depend on the company. She was right, of course. This wasn't about my father's approval anymore. It was about something larger. Responsibility to a community, to a legacy that, despite everything, had value worth preserving. My father's treatment progress was uneven. Some days brought breakthroughs, like when he finally admitted to his gambling problem in group therapy. Other days saw setbacks, angry phone calls accusing me of undermining him or exaggerating his condition. The company situation was equally challenging. I discovered additional equipment that had been sold off, tools that crews needed for current projects. Workers were using rental equipment at high daily rates, eroding already thin profit margins. Some longtime employees, sensing trouble, were quietly updating their resumes. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a weekly status update with the project managers. I had been transparent about the financial challenges without disclosing my father's personal issues, framing the problems as market downturns and strategic missteps. Frank Miller, the oldest project manager who had been with the company since its early days, spoke up during a discussion about equipment shortages. We all know what's going on, he said gruffly. Tom's been struggling. We've seen it. Doesn't mean we don't stand by him in this company. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. These men and women, many of whom had worked alongside my father for decades, weren't oblivious to his decline. They had been covering for him in their own ways, making do with less, finding workarounds for missing equipment, protecting him out of loyalty. We just want straight talk, Frank continued, looking me directly in the eye. Is the company going to survive? Do we still have jobs? Some of us are too old to start over somewhere new. In that moment, I realized that honesty, not perfection, was what these people needed from leadership. I took a deep breath and gave them the unvarnished truth. The company was in serious trouble, but not beyond saving. It would require sacrifices, innovations, and patience. I outlined the recovery plan I had developed, including the steps already taken and those still to come. I can't promise it will be easy, I concluded. But I can promise that every decision will be made with the long-term stability of the company and your jobs as the priority. My father built something important here. Together, we can preserve it and make it stronger. The response was not immediate cheers or easy assurances, but something more valuable. A collective determination that showed in nods, straightened postures, and thoughtful questions about next steps. These were construction people, practical and resilient. They didn't need inspiration so much as direction, and the knowledge that someone was firmly at the helm. That meeting marked a shift in momentum. Word spread through the company that there was a plan and leadership committed to seeing it through. Productivity improved. Ingenious solutions to equipment shortages emerged from crews who had previously kept their heads down. Meanwhile, my father's treatment was beginning to show results. The medication for his dementia, which he was finally taking consistently, helped stabilize his mood and improve his cognitive function. The gambling addiction treatment gave him tools to recognize and resist the impulses that had led to such destructive decisions. 6 weeks into the restructuring, I received an unexpected call from Bill Harper. "Your dad wants to talk to you. Says it's important. Can you meet him at the office tomorrow?" I agreed with some trepidation, unsure what to expect. When I arrived at Wagner Construction the next morning, I found my father sitting in his office, looking more like his old self than he had in months. Clear-eyed, composed, properly dressed in the business casual attire he had always preferred to formal suits. "Thank you for coming," he said formally, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I sat, waiting for him to continue. "I've been doing a lot of thinking and treatment," he began, his voice steady. "About the business, about our relationship, about the kind of legacy I want to leave." He picked up a folder from his desk and handed it to me. Inside was a proposed new organizational structure for Wagner Construction. My father would become chairman emeritus, a position with prestige but limited operational authority. I would transition from acting CEO to a permanent executive role, with the option to name my own successor within 3 years. The employee stock ownership program would be expanded, giving workers a greater stake in the company's success. "This is unexpected," I said, genuinely surprised by the thoughtfulness and detail of the proposal. "I built this company," my father said quietly, "but I nearly destroyed it too. I can see that now, with the medication and therapy. What you've done these past weeks, stepping in, fixing my mistakes without publicly humiliating me. I won't say I've always been wrong about you, because I'm still too stubborn for that. But I will say I haven't given you the credit you deserve." Coming from him, it was as close to an apology and acknowledgement as I could have hoped for. Not perfect, not complete, but genuine progress. "I'd like to take some time to review this," I said, indicating the folder. "Discuss it with my advisors and Jessica." He nodded. "Of course. It's a business decision. Should be treated like one." He hesitated, then added, "How is Jessica? The pregnancy going well?" The question, so normal from a future grandfather, yet so unusual coming from him, caught me off guard. "She's good. Morning sickness is tapering off. We find out next week if it's a boy or girl." "Your mother was sick for 7 months with you," he said, a rare reference to her that wasn't tinged with bitterness or loss. "Couldn't keep anything down except saltine crackers and ginger ale. Strongest woman I ever knew." The conversation shifted then, not to immediate reconciliation or perfect understanding, but to something more realistic. Two flawed men finding small points of connection amid a complicated history. It wasn't everything, but it was something real to build upon. As I left the office that day, I felt a cautious optimism about the future of both the company and our relationship. The road ahead would not be without challenges. Trust, once broken, requires time and consistent effort to rebuild. But for the first time, I believed we both might be willing to put in that effort. What I didn't anticipate was the test that awaited us just around the corner, a final challenge that would either cement our fragile new beginning or shatter it beyond repair. 1 year after the disastrous birthday dinner that had catalyzed so much change, I stood in the showroom of Riverside Ford, examining a modest F-150 with a critical eye. It wasn't the top-of-the-line model I had purchased the previous year, but it was reliable, practical, and within the budget I had set. "This is the one," I told the salesman. "I'll take it in blue." The past 12 months had been transformative for both Wagner Construction and my family. The company had weathered its financial crisis through a combination of strategic downsizing, refinancing, and a renewed focus on sustainable commercial projects, an area where my expertise in green investment had opened new doors. We hadn't fully recovered yet, but we were solidly back in the black, with a clear path forward. My father had completed his intensive treatment program and now attended regular maintenance therapy and support group meetings. The improvement in his cognitive function and emotional regulation was remarkable, though his doctors cautioned that the underlying condition was progressive. We had good days now, which had once seemed impossible. Jessica and I had welcomed our daughter, Sarah, named after my mother, 4 months earlier. Parenthood had changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated, deepening my understanding of both my father's flaws and his strengths. The fierce protectiveness I felt toward my tiny daughter gave me a new perspective on some of his behaviors, even as I remained committed to breaking negative patterns. The truck was a birthday gift, though not for the 60th celebration we had all tried to forget. My father was turning 61, and this more modest vehicle represented something important. A fresh start built on realistic expectations and genuine care, rather than extravagant gestures designed to win approval. That evening, we gathered at my father's house for a small family dinner. Just the 5 of us, my father, Jessica, baby Sarah, Amy, and me. The absence of a crowd was intentional, creating space for authentic connection rather than performance. My father answered the door himself, looking healthier than he had in years. The treatment had helped him lose the bloat that medication and stress had added to his frame, and regular physical therapy for his arthritis had improved his posture and mobility. "There she is," he said, his attention immediately going to Sarah, nestled against Jessica's chest in a baby carrier. "My little construction supervisor." The nickname had emerged during one of his visits to our home, when Sarah had watched with intense concentration as he assembled her crib, tiny brow furrowed in what looked remarkably like inspection. Jessica smiled, unclipping the carrier. "She's been asking for her grandpa all day. Wants to know if you finished that toy box you were building her." It wasn't literally true, as Sarah's communication was still limited to coos and the occasional delighted shriek, but it was the kind of family fiction that created connections, built traditions. "Just put the finish on it this morning," my father replied, carefully taking Sarah in his arms. Baltic birch with rounded corners, safest wood for little explorers. The easy way he held her, confident, yet gentle, still surprised me sometimes. Fatherhood had never seemed to come naturally to him with me, yet grandfatherhood appeared effortless. Dr. Winters had helped me understand that the pressure he had felt as a young father, suddenly widowed and solely responsible for raising a son while building a business, had been entirely different from the joy of grandparenthood, without the weight of primary responsibility. Amy arrived moments later with a homemade cake and news about her recent promotion to Vice President of Operations at Wagner Construction. The restructuring had created opportunities for her to step into a leadership role that better utilized her management skills and education. Dinner was simple, my father grilling steaks on his back patio, while Amy and Jessica prepared sides in the kitchen. I took baby duty, walking Sarah around the backyard, pointing out birds and flowers to her wide, curious eyes. "She looks like your mother," my father said, joining us while the steaks rested. "Something about the eyes." "I think so too," I agreed. "Jessica says she has my determination, though." He chuckled. "Poor kid. 2 stubborn parents, a Wagner and a Marshall. She'll be running the company by 30. The ease of the conversation, the ability to reference my mother without tension, to joke about shared traits. All of it represented healing I once thought impossible. Not perfect healing, not complete understanding, but genuine progress. After dinner, as we sat on the patio with coffee and Amy's chocolate cake, I handed my father a small box, wrapped in simple blue paper. "Happy birthday, Dad." He raised an eyebrow. "I thought we agreed no gifts this year." "It's just something small," I assured him. "Practical." He opened it carefully, methodically removing the tape rather than tearing the paper. A lifetime habit of conservation. I had once found frustrating, but now recognized as part of who he was. Inside the box was a key fob with the Ford logo. He looked up, confusion evident. "What's this for?" "There's a blue F-150 parked around the corner," I explained. "Nothing fancy but solid. Good for job sites and fishing trips to the cabin." For a moment, I feared I had made a mistake, that the echo of last year's extravagant gift would trigger old patterns. Instead, my father turned the key over in his palm thoughtfully. Thank you, Igor. This means a lot. The simple, genuine gratitude was worth more than any elaborate response. It represented not just acceptance of the gift, but acknowledgement of the journey we had taken to reach this point. Later, as Jessica and I prepared to leave with a sleeping Sarah, my father pulled me aside. I have something for you too. Been waiting for the right moment. He led me to his study, a room I had rarely been allowed to enter as a child. From his desk drawer, he withdrew a worn leather journal I recognized immediately as my mother's diary. I should have given you this years ago, he said, placing it in my hands. She wanted you to have it when you were ready. I told myself you weren't ready yet, but the truth is, I wasn't ready to share her with you. That was wrong of me. The admission, so straightforward and without qualification, caught me off guard. This was new territory for us, this honest acknowledgement of past wrongs without deflection or excuse. Thank you, I said simply, running my fingers over the soft leather cover, feeling the connection to my mother it represented. He nodded, then surprised me further by pulling me into a brief but firm embrace. I'm proud of you, son, he said gruffly. The company, your family, the man you've become. I don't say it enough, but I am. The words I had waited decades to hear. Not delivered in some grand emotional scene, but quietly, sincerely, in a private moment between two men who were finally learning how to be father and son on new terms. 1 year later, Wagner Construction celebrated its 35th anniversary with a company picnic at a local park. My father, now officially chairman emeritus, gave a speech thanking the employees who had stood by the company during difficult times. There was no mention of his health struggles or the financial crisis we had navigated, just genuine appreciation for their loyalty and hard work. Afterwards, as families enjoyed the afternoon sunshine, games, and catered barbecue, I found myself sitting with my father at a picnic table, somewhat removed from the main festivities. Sarah, now a toddler with boundless energy, was being entertained by Jessica and Amy at the face painting station. We did all right, didn't we? My father asked, watching the employees and their families with evident satisfaction. Saved the company, preserved the jobs. We did, I agreed. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. He nodded, taking a sip of his iced tea. We had both given up alcohol as part of his recovery support, another small but significant change. You know, I always thought showing weakness was the worst thing a leader could do. Admitting mistakes, asking for help, it seemed like failure. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong about that. Dead wrong. That's not an easy lesson to learn, I acknowledged. Especially for our generation. No, it's not. He watched Sarah toddling back toward us, her face painted like a butterfly, Jessica close behind. I hope you'll teach her better than I taught you. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That asking for help is strength. I'm trying, I said. Every day. As Sarah climbed onto her grandfather's lap, demanding he admire her butterfly face, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. From that humiliating birthday toast to this peaceful family moment, represented more than just a personal reconciliation. It embodied a deeper truth about breaking cycles of emotional harm, about the courage it takes to establish boundaries, and the grace required to allow for growth and change on both sides. My father would never be perfect. His dementia would progress, bringing new challenges. Our relationship would continue to have difficult moments alongside the good ones. But we had found a way forward based on truth, respect, and acceptance of our flawed humanity. It was enough, more than enough. You know what I've learned through all this? I said to my father as we watched Sarah run back to the face painting station for another design. What's that? He asked. That real strength isn't found in never falling or never failing. It's in how we rise, how we repair, how we rebuild, just like in construction. He smiled at that, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Sounds like something a builder would say. Maybe there's hope for you yet. We both laughed. The old tension transformed into something like affection. Not perfect, but real. And real was all we needed to be. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to heal family relationships. Thank you for listening. And I hope this story brings some comfort to those navigating their own complicated family dynamics.